Hello, everybody. The title kind of says it all. I am just stuck on Obsession. I haven't stopped thinking about it for days, and so I guess I'm going to do what, at this point, I always do when I can't stop thinking about something, and that's record myself talking about it. So, welcome. I'm kind of going off the dome here, so I'm not really sure how much of this is going to make sense or cohere into any actual point, so just temper your expectations, I guess. Just for some quick setup, I'm not actually sure if I've mentioned it here before, but I'm a bit of a film freak. It would not be an exaggeration to say that I'll watch pretty much whatever you put on in front of me, with very few exceptions. My love for the medium pretty much supersedes any need I have for objective quality, which is kind of just a fancy way of saying that I have no standards. As long as images are being projected in sequence to create the illusion of movement, I'm happy. But I feel like a solid 50% of the movies I do end up watching are horror, which is probably my favorite genre. I've watched such an ungodly amount that at this point I'm kind of desensitized to the genre. I just do not get scared anymore. Which could also be like a medication thing, but that's a whole other conversation. I've seen all your tricks, all your jumps and goofs and gags you can throw at me. It just will not hit my scary bone. I am a man without fear. And with all that said, this movie terrified me. In that theater, I was scared in a way I haven't felt from a movie in years. The movie got out at about midnight, and I think I spent the entire trip home, as well as the next full day, just feeling like I was a scared little kid hearing a loud noise in the basement for the first time. It was incredible. And as of recording this a full week later now, I have not once stopped thinking about this movie. You could say I'm enthralled by Obsession. I'll explain the premise real quick just for anyone who's not caught up, because it's actually pretty simple. So this guy named Bear has a crush on his longtime friend and coworker named Nikki. So he buys what at first seems like a joke item, the One Wish Willow, and wishes for her to love him specifically more than anything else in the world. Surprise, it actually works, and Nikki very quickly starts to act strange. In a way, I was kind of predisposed to liking or at least enjoying this movie because I love a good monkey's paw. It's always really neat to have a character kind of faced with the reality or the dark reflection of their deepest desires. It always makes for really good horror and really interesting character stuff.
Look, everybody! My purse exploded!
The horror in this movie is such a breath of fresh air, not only because it really genuinely scared me, but also because it's just so clever and simple. No one turns into a big scary monster, there's no giant piles of goop and gore really, all the horror is just people. And that's not to say I don't love some goop and gore, they're probably some of my favorite things ever. But it's always really refreshing to have a modern, wide-release horror movie that's just not that at all. Aside from one or two scenes, but my point stands. Anyways, most, if not all, of the horror in this movie is completely rooted in the leading actress Indy Navarrette's performance, which is... honestly, there are no words that can properly describe it, but I'll try to find some anyway just to give you an idea. Insane, guttural, brutal, multifaceted, terrifying, shocking, earth-shattering, meteoric, that's a word, and supernova. Anyway, I think you get the idea. It's ridiculous. It is legitimately impossible to overstate how incredible this performance is. I legitimately cannot imagine where you have to go to kind of draw that performance out of yourself. It is... oh my god. Whatever you have in your mind after I said all those words, it is better than that. You don't know yet. You just don't know. Like I said, I was already really anticipating this movie for a while. But even then I was skeptical when I first saw people raving about this performance. But, again, I was wrong. Legitimately, nothing I or anyone else can say or tell you will prepare you for this performance. It is just... you don't know. You don't know yet. Not only is she truly chilling as Freaky Nikki, I think we're calling her, but also, in the probably 15-20 minutes of the movie before Bear actually makes the wish, you get such a solid sense of who Nikki is as a person, and also how their relationship actually works before any of this, and the dynamic of their friend group. Which, of course, also comes down to the screenplay, which, like I said before, is just really simple and clever. Apparently you can already find it online, which is pretty cool. Anyways, point being, they just do a really great job of painting a picture of who the real Nikki is in the relatively short amount of time we spend with her. Nikki seems really cool, but also very real and flawed. To be honest, I feel like if I knew Nikki, I would probably also have a weird, unhealthy crush on her as well. And so would you. I think the coolest thing about the movie, and my favorite part of Indy Navarrette's performance, is that because you get such a strong sense of who the real Nikki is, you spend the entire rest of the movie thinking back to and being reminded of exactly who is being overwritten and replaced by Bear's wish. And that definitely comes through in the performance, but also even in the wardrobe and costume design, as all these little quirks and isms and style that Nicky once had are slowly replaced by just Bear's ideal of someone who loves him. I saw someone online say, and I think this is probably the best way to put it, that the most horrifying perspective in the movie is Nicky's. And on that note, I think Bear is also a really interesting character and just a great protagonist for a movie like this. And that performance from Michael Johnston is just as crucial as Indy Navarrette's in making this movie work.
Most of the film is my character Bear being scared.
Again, for pretty much the entire movie, he's not only the one who's selling the fact that all these scares and Nicky's behavior are scary, but he's also the one who's setting up those scares for the audience. This is going to be a bit of a detour, so just go with me for a bit, okay? For the most part, modern horror films, especially out of Hollywood, get most of their scare mileage out of jump scares, which I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with. Jump scares can be legitimately cool and valuable parts of a movie when done well, but unfortunately, a lot of the time you end up in a situation where it's jump scare after jump scare after jump scare, and you just get kinda numb to it at a point, you know? Anyways, since the goal of a jump scare is to spook the audience out of their seats, hence the name, most of the time they're shot and edited in a way that makes them both a shock to us, the audience, but also to the character whose perspective we're seeing in the film. So, more often than not, the flow of your average jump scare scene will go like this. A character finds themselves in an environment that they're unfamiliar with, or is otherwise dangerous or unknown to them. Then, ideally, after building tension for a while through sound ramps, or fake-outs, or ambiance, or atmospheric sound, or no sound, or something like that, the scare happens, and the monster or whatever it is comes out, usually accompanied by a very, very, very loud noise. And then finally you have the reaction shot of the character being freaked out or scared of whatever just happened. This part also kind of serves to model the reaction the movie hopes the audience will have in this moment. It's this whole thing about what's called the body genres, which are essentially comedy, horror, and pornography, all of which essentially seek to elicit a very specific physical reaction from the audience. This won't be on the test, I just thought it was cool to mention. The reason I think jump scares are as ever-present as they are in horror is because they kind of lower the barrier to entry for the movie and make the horror more palatable and even communal. Again, not a bad thing, I'm just explaining how it works. A jump scare is a momentary build of tension and a quick release. Everybody jumps and shrieks at the same time, then we can all look around the theater and giggle about how silly we feel. It's kind of community building, in the same way laughing at a joke together in a comedy is. It's beautiful, but also it kind of presents a problem. If all your horror is squeezed into these short moments of tension and release, then the audience subconsciously knows that after each of these points they don't need to worry about being scared until the tension starts to build to the next jump scare, points which are pretty easy to identify, but that could just be because I've watched a shitload of these, I don't actually know how other people experience it. Anyways, long story short, if the majority of your movie's horror comes from jump scares, then paradoxically the audience will spend the majority of the movie not scared. Again, makes it more palatable and accessible to larger audiences, but also kind of makes it less horror? But anyways, even though I just gave that whole rundown on the general flow of a jump scare scene, the main two things you want to remember are scare and then reaction shot, which 9 times out of 10 makes for a very particular response from the audience. Anyways, this isn't like a rule for every jump scare ever, this is just to give you a general idea of how they work and how they flow. All that said, the most interesting thing about Obsession's horror is that it does the exact opposite. As opposed to your typical scare followed by a reaction shot that I just outlined, Obsession kind of reverses the two. Instead of the usual horror which focuses more on the shock value of a loud scare, Obsession puts its focus squarely on building that quiet dread and tension up to the scare as a climax. Also, kind of goes without saying, but I'm going to say it anyway so people don't comment about it, but this is not like a new, unique thing to Obsession. This is kind of the way horror film was operated for basically forever, honestly. I'm pretty sure the first actual cinematic jump scare was like Citizen Kane with the bird. Anyways, this whole tangent was just to kind of lay it in contrast to a lot of other modern Hollywood horror movies that tend to kind of overuse jump scares, or maybe use them as a crutch, let's say. It's better now than it was in like the 2010s, but it's still not amazing. It just feels like there's something missing from the equation a lot of the time. But to get to the actual point, this has all been an extremely long-winded way to say that nowhere in the movie is that idea of building the dread and tension more present than in Michael Johnston's performance as Bear. There are so many shots in this movie that just hold on Bear's face with this look that's like a weird mix of confusion, horror, sadness, excitement, and like arousal, maybe? I don't know, I can't really tell. There's a lot of something in there. But like I said before, his face and that look are just so key to selling the horror of this movie. As far as I can remember, I spent like every single one of those moments just praying the camera would not cut to what he was looking at. Like I said, this movie really freaked me out in a way that nothing really has in a long time. I think the point in the movie where I realized, oh, I am afraid, is near the halfway point, I think, when Bear and Nikki have been in a relationship, I guess, for about a week or two now, and the more supernatural cracks in Freaky Nikki have started to show. They had this conversation where Bear's like, hey, you gotta stop doing weird spooky shit, it's really freaking me out. And Nikki's like, yeah, okay, I didn't know that was a problem, it's all good. And being the clever audience member you are, you think to yourself, well, obviously that's not gonna last, because this is a horror movie after all, but don't dwell on that right now, because Bear needs to get to work. So he turns to face the door, and he just stops and stares as that look comes over his face. And when we cut away, we see what he's looking at. The door, duct taped shut. Just completely covered in duct tape. And I know that probably doesn't sound especially scary when I'm describing it, but just trust me, in the moment, in the movie, it is chilling. It's such a great moment. And that also kind of segues me into something else I want to talk about, which is the shockingly low budget of the movie. The movie apparently was shot for like under $1 million, which is nuts, and then after it premiered at TIFF, Blumhouse came on board, and then Focus Features bought it for like $15 million, which is crazy. Obsession is the exact kind of indie dreamboat that film freaks dream about all the time. Like, a first-time director who's not a big name, a borderline unknown cast except Andy Richter for 2 scenes, I guess, and like I said, a low-ass budget where they apparently didn't even have the money for stunt doubles. None of that fancy shit, it's just pure, undiluted movie magic. And obviously you probably know this already because, you're watching this video, but the movie's also been doing crazy well. It's getting young people out to the theater as I think the majority of the audience, which is nuts. It's still a dominant topic of conversation on the internet after like a week and a half, which never happens. And I'm pretty sure it's legitimately breaking box office records, which is just so cool for a movie that came out of nowhere like this. Plus, they apparently didn't have it in the budget for copious amounts of, or maybe any CGI, so that just leads to a lot of really cool and unique and fun problem solving. Like, for example, they sewed the title card onto the sheets. That's so cool! Basically, from where I'm sitting, it kind of feels like most of the reasons that Obsession is so instantly beloved can be directly tied back to its status as an indie production. Take all that with a grain of salt though, because obviously, I was not there. But you can just kind of feel it radiating off the movie, you know? There's just this grit and like a meanness to it that feels so unique to this movie and makes it really stand out among other massive release horror movies, especially from Blumhouse. To be honest, I still kind of can't believe this is a Blumhouse release. Like, don't quote me on this quite yet, but this might actually be the best thing they've had their name on in like a decade. Hollywood pretty much never learns the right lesson from moments like these, so I am kind of interested to see what they're going to do this time instead of prioritizing lower budgets or creative new ideas. Please be excited for a bunch of cynically made crazy girlfriend movies in the future. I can't wait. Oh yeah, I guess I haven't really mentioned this, but this movie is also very funny. Only in short bursts because, horror, but it does actually strike that balance, in my opinion, a lot better than some other actual horror comedies have. There are so many moments in this movie that are so darkly funny, but also at the same time just really genuinely frightening. It's this weird balance and blend of the two that I've seen so many other movies try and strike and just completely crumple under the weight of. It just has a really cool effect, and I'm not sure I've seen it done quite this well, at least recently. On a different note, the score is also so incredibly sick. I'm pretty sure it's the composer's first score, ever, and you could have fooled me. Please keep doing it, sir. Little tangent, the score is one of many parts of the movie that feel very Silent Hill 2. Bear is pretty much Neo James Sunderland, they're both very sexually frustrated, depressed, weird guys. Nikki is kind of like if Maria and Mary shared a body, and the whole vibe of the movie is just very reminiscent of the Maria ending of Silent Hill 2, if that means anything to you.
You'd better do something about that cough.
Also, fog is present. Obviously, I've got no way of knowing if this is intentional or not, but based on Trey Barker's age, I'm just going to assume he's a Silent Hill fan, and you can't stop me. Okay, I think I've got all the Silent Hill talk out of my system now. Sorry. Also, just because I don't really have any other place to put this, I think Ian is a really fun character as well. At the start of the movie, you're like, okay, this is the comic relief best friend, right? He's gonna crack a couple jokes, wingman Bear for a bit, keep things light, and he seems genuinely concerned for both Bear and Nikki, because they kind of just start dating out of nowhere. It's weird. But about 2/3 of the way through the movie, you learn something about him that completely reframes everything he has done and everything he's said throughout the entire movie, and you realize, no, this guy is a fucking asshole. But yeah, it's really neat to have those layers even for a supporting character. Like, everything he says has some duplicitous double meaning. It's so fun. I think probably the best compliment I can give this cast and these characters is that I would probably watch a totally non-horror, non-supernatural drama about them. They're just really compelling on their own. Again, I've only seen it the one time so far, but I'm pretty sure the only thing I'd really register as a flaw or something that took me out of the movie is this really weird and kind of out-of-place feeling line of ADR at the start of the final scene, and I don't really know why it was there. I guess it's to set up the fact that that character is where they are for later in the scene, but the thing they're talking about in the line is something that both the person they're talking to and the audience already know and were there for in the previous scene. So for now, I guess my assumption's going to be that it's like a leftover from a previous cut of the movie when they hadn't actually shot that scene yet. I don't know. It's not really a problem, I guess it's more a point of confusion than anything else. But yeah, that's kind of it. There's nothing else I can really think of in the movie that took me out of it in any way, and even then it was only for a few seconds, so like, whatever. Back to Nikki for a bit. Before The Wish, she talks a lot about the book she's writing. Like, she goes, it's not a romance, it's a love story, which is kind of the movie. I think I wanted that to come back in some way, and I guess it sort of does in the poem scene, just showcasing how much her own interiority has kind of collapsed into just being about Bear. But I guess I kind of wanted a more direct acknowledgement of the book, like an all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy type thing, but maybe that would have been too on the nose, I don't know. I'm assuming / hoping there's a deleted scene about it somewhere, if there are any deleted scenes, I don't actually know. But to be honest, I kind of just want more of this movie in any capacity I can find it, so I'll take whatever. It's just so excessively my shit. Something else I find really interesting and timely about this movie, and it's kind of a massive reach on my part, but I'm going to say it anyway, is that it kind of feels like there's a lot of AI anxiety baked into it as well. Unfortunately, we live in a time where some people feel they have nowhere and no one else to turn to but to fake people and fake conversations. And prepare for a volcanic hot take, I don't think that's healthy. People need people. They need human connections with thoughts and feelings and beliefs that they can bounce off of and that can challenge them. I don't know if you guys have ever tried to talk to one of those AI chatbots before, but they fucking suck. They only exist to generate information and eventual profit for whatever company owns them. All they're designed to do is just glaze you endlessly and stroke your ego so you feel like coming back to give them more. There's also the whole rapidly destroying the planet thing, but that's a whole other conversation. What Bear's wish in this movie does is take Nikki, someone he can genuinely connect with and deeply cares about, and warps her into something hollow, something that only exists to fill a purpose, and that purpose is Bear. Ultimately, Bear is too afraid to even attempt being with someone who could really challenge him or reject him even. Instead, Bear creates a Nikki who is completely devoted to him. It removes her agency and interiority. She no longer exists unless she's orbiting around Bear. She no longer has a purpose outside of bringing him comfort and pleasure. To Bear, Nikki has essentially become the same thing as one of those AI girlfriends you hear about. Anyways, I'm going to talk about something now that I can't really get into without spoilers, so skip here to avoid or just go watch the movie. It's real good, real fun. Probably my favorite new horror movie so far this year, if you couldn't tell. But yeah, I guess I'll see you in like 2 seconds either way. I've been thinking a lot about men recently, and probably not in the way you're imagining based on my interests. I guess it's more like the idea or ideal of men, but let's step back a bit so I can properly explain. In the last week, I've seen a lot of conversation online about who the real villain of the movie is, and to put my own unsolicited 2 cents in, it's definitely not Nikki, it's not Ian, and it's not even Bear. The true villain of Obsession is patriarchy. Now, I should preface this by saying, I don't know what I'm talking about. I haven't read bell hooks or anyone else important in this field, so this is all entirely vibes based on my part. So just take it as that, I guess. To get right to the point for once, I see Bear as a kind of cautionary tale, as the logical or maybe illogical extreme of a clearly very unwell young man, shaped and continuously affected by the influence of a patriarchal system. One that most obviously and overtly affects women, but also men and everyone else in between. The ways masculinity is defined in this system are pretty basic. Strength, dominance over both women and other men, and borderline comedic levels of stoicism. As the British used to say, I think, you keep a stiff upper lip, you close yourself off, you don't express your emotions, and most importantly, you don't leave yourself vulnerable. With, I guess, the implicit promise being that if you adhere to these tenets, reward or general gain awaits you sometime, somewhere, somehow? I don't know.
Again, this is really not my field.
But obviously that ideal is not at all sustainable for a human being. Emotions are a pretty core part of being alive, and trying not to feel them is like trying not to pee. Sure, you can hold it in for a while, but eventually it's going to have to come out, or you'll need medical assistance. But being shaped by and living under that standard is how we get people like Bear, people who've been taught to become so detached from themselves and so afraid of vulnerability that they don't even know who they are. Importantly, I think Ian is the one who serves as the kind of mouthpiece for those patriarchal ideals in the movie. Ian is like the devil on Bear's shoulder, constantly whispering in his ear, reminding him that he isn't measuring up. Even from the literal first scene of the movie, Bear rehearses this long, legitimately moving confession at the diner, and what does Ian say? He goes, "No, that's cringe. You cannot do that. Guard your feelings, don't express them, and don't make yourself vulnerable. Just be nonchalant about it." This is one of those moments I pointed out earlier where when you think back to it, you're like, oh, that wasn't Ian being a fun, chill, best friend wingman, that was him throwing Bear under the fucking bus with his terrible advice. What a dick! Sorry, I just had to get that out of my system. Oh my god. Anyways, even the way Bear comes into contact with the One-Wish Willow is because of that same idea. He goes out initially trying to find a new version of the necklace Nikki lost, but he ultimately chickens out, thinking it would feel too intimate or vulnerable or whatever. And what does he go for instead? A joke gift, the One-Wish Willow, allowing him to hide behind the irony of the gift instead of letting it express his feelings. One of my favorite details in the movie is that Bear lives in his deceased grandma's house. We don't know how long it's been since she died or even how long he's lived there, but you notice right away that nothing on the walls, nothing in his room, nowhere in the house is there anything to indicate that Bear lives here. There are no posters hanging on the wall, there are barely any pictures, nothing like that. There's no indication here that Bear even exists. All he is to the audience, and by proxy himself, is someone else's ill-fitting, empty house. And the only other thing in that house is Bear's cat, which I presume was his grandma's at some point and whose name I don't remember. And at the very start of the movie, that cat is dead. The one thing Bear could define himself by and find meaning or purpose or some kind of comfort and company in is gone. And in a way, the void left by that dead cat kind of becomes what Nikki's filling in the rest of the movie. And speaking of Nikki again, I love that as soon as he picks up the phone, you're instantly like, wait, this isn't just like a crush on an acquaintance or a coworker or someone he barely speaks to. These two are immediately, very clearly the closest relationship either one of them has, and that makes what happens in the story all the more tragic. Even if it's not an explicitly romantic connection, they both clearly still care about and love each other deeply. They still have each other, whether it's romantic or otherwise. But Bear is just too cataclysmically depressed to be able to see it, or even to believe it. What he thinks he needs right now after his cat dies is something to replace it, something new to cherish and protect. And he thinks that replacement is Nikki, but again, he is just too scared, too depressed, and too influenced by that shadow of patriarchy to even attempt to express his feelings. Hence, the One-Wish Willow. Even though at the outset he doesn't know the wish is real, and it takes a while for him to even register that, in a dark way, the wish kind of becomes Bear taking what he feels is his promised reward after holding to those tenets of what an ideal man is for so long. Okay, just one last thing I want to touch on, and it's that horror, a lot of the time, especially psychological horror like this movie kind of bends towards, is really just a character study. You got your protagonist, your main character, who has some internal problem that the horror of the movie and the action of the plot is kind of shaped by and orbiting around. Think Cat People, all of Romero's Dead trilogy, and his other Dead trilogy, I guess, every Nightmare on Elm Street movie, the list goes on and on and on and on and on forever. And with Obsession, like him or not, Bear is our main character. And through him, we start by examining that fear of intimacy, of self-expression, depression, mental health, all that jazz, and the dire consequences it has for the women and everyone else around him. None of this excuses the things Bear does, but it does explain them, which is much more interesting. Now, back to that idea of a character's internal preoccupations manifesting in the plot, what I think Bear wants is to be a hero. He wants to be someone people can count on, someone they're even devoted to, and he wants a cheerleader in the form of Nikki. That's the way he envisions his version of the ideal patriarchal man, someone who still has that control and that power, but uses it for, at least ostensibly, altruistic purposes. But what happens when you've just fucked up beyond repair? You've ruined a person who you love. How do you fix that? How do you balance the scales on that? Well, what could be more romantic and more heroic than death?
No, it's fine.
Go ahead.
I would kill myself.
I adore that every single time Bear looks to find help for the One-Wish Willow, after whoever he's talking to gives him their first answer and Bear starts spacing out thinking about things, you can just hear the other person go, "Or you could kill yourself, that might work."
Cue the desperate. What must I do to convince you people?
Die.
Granted, it's fucked up, but it's really funny. And by the end of the movie, once all other options are finally exhausted, he tries it. He downs a bottle of his grandma's medication, and Bear sticks his fingers down his throat and tries to puke them back up. After a whole movie spent doing nothing, completely impotent and stun-locked into inaction, the one time he has a chance to do something undeniably positive to set things right in any way, he chickens out, and Nikki inadvertently ends up saving herself anyways. Of the many very funny jokes in the movie, Bear is the biggest one.
I'm just trying to give God what I thought he wanted. I've been trying to kill myself all day.
If you ask me, a horror movie's #1 job is to make you as uncomfortable as possible. Whether it's the real highbrow stuff, or it's just, hey, you want to see how much blood and guts we can squeeze out of this guy? Either way, I tend to feel like the more discomfort that's being generated, then the better and more effective the horror is. Unfortunately for me, I see a lot of myself in Bear, and I recognize a lot of what I see in Nikki and Ian and Sarah, who I just realized I haven't mentioned this entire time, but don't get it twisted, she is also a very interesting part of the movie. And that familiarity is disturbing. It forces you to acknowledge parts of yourself and of the people around you that you'd probably prefer not to. Everyone's felt lonely or depressed, everyone's had a crush or felt that extreme, all-consuming sense of devotion to someone, and this movie takes all those feelings and pushes them to their absolute most dangerous extremes. And like I said, that's kind of horror's job, to present a warped reflection of personal or social values to its audience, and ultimately just to make you think and feel and maybe even see those values in a different light. Whether it's just a byproduct of the moment it's made or even unintentional, this is still a massive part of any horror movie, whether it's Alien, Texas Chainsaw, or even Corona Zombies. Yes, that is a real movie, and no, I would not recommend watching it. But yeah, this has gone on for twice as long as I thought it would, so I think it's time to wrap up. I'm hoping I've got it all out of my system, I don't know. Probably my favorite new horror movie so far this year, with very little contest. Give Indian Already every single award possible, even if it's not movie related, just all of them. In fact, rescind all previous acting awards from the point Obsession started filming onwards, and just give them all to her instead. It's deserved. But yeah, instant classic in my opinion. I'm super excited to see what everyone does from here. It's just such an insane breakout for everyone involved, it's kind of ridiculous. If you haven't seen the movie yet, and I haven't already convinced you, please go watch it, it's great. And if you have seen the movie, go watch it again. I'm going to, maybe tonight, I don't know. But I think that's all I got for today, so I will see you next time. Bye-bye! Additionally, I have a question about the One-Wish Willow. Did you notice that both this and last year's weapons had the spell initiated by, snapping some wood? What's up with that? Is that a witch thing? Is that a common witch thing? Is it part of the lore? I don't know. If anyone out there is a witch or knows a witch, let me know. I got a couple questions on that front. But yeah, that's it. Bye-bye for real.